here is the most underrated add-on for every single killer in Dead by Daylight. These are add-ons that aren't incredible, but they still have a lot of value that people overlook. If you enjoy this video and want to see more videos like this, feel free to drop a like and subscribe if you're new. For the trapper, I'm going to give it to the fastening tools. The fastening tools increase the bear trap rescue and escape times by 25%, so survivors are going to be stuck in your traps 25% longer, which is already a nice bonus, on top of the fact that you can set your bear traps 50% faster. This is really good for an aggressive trapper playstyle. Most trappers feel like they need to play in this very defensive style, but if you just carry one trap with you at all times, you can use this to your advantage to spook survivors while you're in chase at like a pallet or something. You're able to set a trap in a chase so quickly that the survivor barely has any time to react to go to a different loop. But obviously when you start doing this, the survivors are going to start to expect it while in chase, so you can easily pretend to put down a trap just to force the survivors to leave that loop and hopefully hit them before they get to the next loop. That's the best part about this add-on, but the 25% slower escape or rescue times is also kind of nice because there are occasionally moments where you're going to down somebody that got stuck in one of your traps, but they escape just a couple of seconds before you get there. This add-on will essentially prevent those situations from happening. Okay, for Wraith, I'm going to give this to the Brown Ghost add-on. This add-on hides your terror radius and your red stain for 6 seconds after uncloaking, and it's genuinely one of Wraith's best add-ons that I don't see a lot of people using. It is so confusing to hear a Wraith uncloak, but you don't get any terror radius and you don't see any red stain. Plus, if they pair this with the Bone Clapper add-on, which makes their bell indiscernible in direction and distance, you're never going to know if the killer's uncloaking near you. For Hillbilly, I'm going to give this to Mother's Helpers. Mother's Helpers reduces the charge time of your chainsaw by 18% for 30 seconds after being stunned by a pallet. I feel like this is so underrated because a lot of people say it's situational, which sure it is because you have to be stunned by a pallet, but if you just don't respect pallets at all, then you're going to be getting this active a lot. It's kind of like having the old engraving add-ons where your charge time is way faster for little to no downside. For Nurse, I'm going to give this to the Pocket Watch. This add-on increases the duration of the chain blink window by 0.2 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is really helpful. Essentially what this means is after you blink for the first time, you have a certain amount of time before you can blink again, otherwise you go into a fatigue state, and the Pocket Watch increases the amount of time that you do have. This not only gives you a little bit of a buffer room for mistimed second blinks, it also technically increases the distance of your second blink as well because you have more time to charge it. It's essentially just giving you a nice cushion if you're making mistakes on your blinks. For Huntress, I'm going to give this to the Wooden Fox, which grants you the undetectable status effect for 30 seconds after reloading. You surprisingly get a lot of value out of this add-on. I think a majority of players just have never heard of this add-on before. They're still going to hear your lullaby, but they're not going to expect you to be nearby because they can't hear your heartbeat. And you can basically activate this whenever you want. You just have to throw one hatchet and reload. It's a very good way to confuse the survivors and make them second guess every single time they hear the lullaby. But I think the best part about this add-on is if you reload in chase, the survivor won't hear your terror radius anymore, so they might think that you left, which will catch them really off guard. For Myers, I'm going to give this to the Mirror Shard. This reveals the auras of survivors for 5 seconds if they've been stalked for at least 1 second while in Evil Within 2, and it's simply just a good way to get more information. Like, there's not really much to say about it. For Doctor, this is kind of a similar thing to Myers. I'm going to give this to the Restraint Carter's Notes add-on. This makes it so that when a survivor's madness increases a tier, their aura is revealed for 3 seconds. So with this, you're able to see the auras of every single survivor that you static blast throughout the entire match, and you'll occasionally get information if you're static shocking a survivor, which is especially helpful on indoor maps where you've lost your line of sight. Again, not much to say about it besides getting more information, which is always helpful. And to add on to that, there is a second part of this add-on which increases the illusionary doctor duration by 6 seconds. These are the fake doctors that appear near the survivor, and having them up longer may allow you to see where a survivor is on the map if you didn't see it before those 6 seconds. For Leatherface, I'm going to give this to the Grizzly Chains. This makes survivors mangled if you hit them with your chainsaw, and this sounds pretty mediocre, but it's essentially like having Sloppy Butcher on your chainsaw. If you're constantly getting downs with your chainsaw, it's adding so much slowdown for the survivors that are healing, and it's just a really good way to kind of slow the game down a bit so you can build pressure easier. In my opinion, Mangled is just a really underrated status effect, but unfortunately it's gotten worse with the introduction of the healing meta. For Freddy Krueger, I'm going to give this to the Jump Rope, which increases the volume of survivors' grunts of pain by 50% if they're in the dream world. Now this does sound really bad on paper, but in practice it's actually kind of useful. If you're chasing a survivor in a loop that you can't see over, you're going to be able to track them with your ears instead of your eyes way easier. So if you're paying attention, that'll mitigate any mind games that the survivors try to do on you. And then of course, it's just helpful to find survivors that may be stealthing around the map while they're in the dream world, and being able to find stealthy survivors is a much appreciated bonus. For the Pig, I'm going to give this to the Combat Straps, which increases your crouch speed by 30%. In my opinion, this is one of the best Pig add-ons because a lot of times if you're using your ambush without this add-on, survivors have plenty of time to just leave to a different loop. But with this add-on, you're able to crouch so fast that they don't really have enough time to get to another loop before you can catch up to them. So if you're going to be ambushing a lot, I would highly recommend throwing this on. For the clown, I'm going to give this to the cigar box. This shows you the auras of any survivors within 16 meters from you while you're invigorated, which means you walked through your yellow gas. This is really helpful if you use your yellow bottles to get to places quickly on the map, because then you're constantly going to be able to find survivors that may be hiding or find survivors that you kind of catch off guard. And this power can be amplified if you're using stealth perks as well. The only downside to this add-on is if a survivor goes into your yellow gas, they will also be able to see your aura. So it's kind of hard to use this in chase. For the spirit, I'm going to have to give it to the mother's glasses. This add-on is extremely underrated, but basically if a survivor comes within 2 meters of your husk during a phase walk, you'll get killer instinct to know that they're there. And this add-on alone isn't that incredible, but if you pair it with the purple add-on Wakizashi Saya, if that's how you pronounce it, you're able to press a button to immediately return to your husk. So by pairing these two together, you can place your husk in a very particular position and try to force the survivor to go towards the husk, and then immediately once you hear the killer instinct, you teleport to them. It's a super easy way to get a hit if you're zoning the survivors properly. For the Legion, this is going to go to Julie's mixtape. This refills your power if you get stunned by any means in Feral Frenzy. And the reason this is good is because you don't have to respect any pallets whatsoever while you're in Feral Frenzy. Because if they stun you, you just get your power back and you can hop right over that pallet and hit them anyway. I think it's especially good if you're using a Spirit Fury Enduring build, because that synergizes very well with this add-on. So I'd highly recommend trying that out. For Plague, this is actually going to her meme add-on Prayer Tablet Fragment. This is one of those add-ons that gives you a quote-unquote downside, but you get more blood points if you're using it. So like for Bubba, his meme add-on literally makes his chainsaw only do 1 health state, so it doesn't insta-down. But for Plague, it's low-key kind of good. It has a downside where you can no longer puke on survivors to infect them, which sounds absolutely terrible, but an object that you infect stays that way for an additional 40 seconds, which is double the normal infection time. And the rate that survivors become infected by these infected objects is increased by 100%. So if you puke on a gen, a survivor working on it will become infected so quickly. This is an add-on that'll be hard to use at first, but if you adapt your playstyle and your perk build around this add-on, it'll actually give you a really fun and unique take on the Plague. For Ghostface, I'm going to give this to the Victim's Detailed Routine. I feel like for this one, people don't think it's necessarily bad. It's just pushed aside for all of his other good add-ons. This makes a survivor exhausted for 5 seconds if you mark them, which means you'll be able to secure the insta-down much easier because they no longer have access to any exhaustion perks whatsoever. So this is just really good to secure those kills, but also to counter the strongest exhaustion perk, Sprint Burst, because if a survivor's working on a gen and you mark them, if they run away, they're obviously not going to get their Sprint Burst, so they won't be able to make a ton of distance, and hopefully you're able to down them before they get their Sprint Burst back. For the Demogorgon, I'm going to give this to Sticky Lining, which increases the Killer Instinct's detection range by 2.5 meters. The reason I think this is underrated is because it's good for getting information on people who are working on gens. There's a certain radius around generators where you can't actually place your portals, so sometimes they're just out of reach of the survivors that are working on the gens, and this add-on fixes that problem, because now even if you're not able to put the portal really close to the generator, you're still going to have that additional range to detect a survivor working on the gen. And obviously this information is really good if you have gen slowdown perks, or if you want to find somebody, or even if you just want to play really aggressively and just keep teleporting around the map to confuse survivors. For Oni, I'm going to give this to the Iridescent Family Crest. Everybody says that this is one of his worst add-ons, but I feel like it has potential if you're looking for survivors. This add-on makes it so that if you miss a hit while in your power, any survivor that's within 24 meters of you will scream. So let's say you're using barbecue on him, right? And you hook a survivor and you see somebody else across the map. So you decide to activate your power so you can get to them quicker, but they decide to urban evasion away and you have no idea where they went. So now you basically just wasted your power because you can't find anybody. But with this add-on, you're able to find that urban evasioning survivor, which will help you get back on track. I'm just saying, I've been seeing a lot of stealthy survivors lately, and this is basically a direct counter to them. This video is sponsored by my Discord server. Come join if you want to ask me any questions or find people to play with. The link is in the description below. For the Deathslinger, I think his most underrated add-on is the Rusted Spike. This makes any survivor that you spear and hit mangled, and as a Deathslinger, a majority of your hits are gonna be in this exact situation. So you're basically applying mangled to every single survivor you hit. And just like Bubba's add-on from earlier, it just slows the game down and gives you time to build pressure, which also synergizes with him really well because you can throw on Nurse's Calling, which will give you even more information since they're healing for longer, and Nurse's Calling is already good on ranged killers. For Pyramid Head, this is hard because every single one of his add-ons is just absolutely terrible except for his range add-ons, but I'm probably gonna have to go with the Tablet of the Oppressor, which increases your power duration by 2 seconds. This is relatively helpful if you start your power too early while you're chasing a survivor. It gives you a couple extra seconds to correct your aim before actually throwing your sword, and this is also just helpful if you're putting down trails a lot, because if you find a survivor after you used up all your trails, then obviously you don't have any power. But with with this add-on, you get an additional 2 seconds of use, so it's more likely that you will have your power available when you find a survivor. But honestly, just stick to the range add-ons. For Blight, I'm going to give it to the Rose Tonic, which increases your slam duration by 1 second. So it's kind of like the Nurse add-on that we were talking about earlier. It gives you an extra second of buffer room to start your next rush. And this is actually quite helpful, especially if you're in like an indoor map or something with doors where you really have to be precise with your movements. Like let's say you're trying to use your power into shack. From certain angles, it's difficult to get into the shack door. So you have to use that slam duration to position yourself into a better angle. And this add-on just facilitates that. For the twins, I'm giving this to the Brown Toy Sword add-on, which reduces the charge time of a pounce by minus 0.2 seconds. Being able to charge your pounce quicker, even if it's a very small percentage, is always nice because it's much easier to catch survivors that may be running around a tight loop. Like for example, if you take some of the smaller rocks on Ormond that survivors can just loop around infinitely basically while you're in Victor, this add-on makes it so that you are able to hit them before they go around the corner of that rock. It's really helpful, and I'm sure the 3 people who use twins use this add-on as well, but who knows? For Trickster, this is going to go to the Tequila Moonrock. This increases your main event duration by 50%. This is good because it gives you more time to snowball pressure if you have grouped up survivors, but the problem with this add-on is if you don't have grouped up survivors, the main event's basically not going to do anything anyway, but that's just a design problem in Trickster himself. But say you have a couple of survivors on the basement hooks and another survivor goes to save them. You're going to have enough time to use your main event on all 3 of them and down all 3 of them really easily. But I don't really play the Trickster because he's extremely boring and terribly designed and very unfun, so if this add-on is genuinely garbage, just let me know down in the comments below. For Nemesis, I'm giving this to the Serotonin Injector, which makes you undetectable for 15 seconds if you kill a zombie. This is basically giving you Tinkerer whenever you want as long as you have a zombie nearby, and it can be very good for just catching survivors off guard, especially if you're going to a specific generator. There's not much else to say about this add-on, it just makes you way stealthier way more often. For Pinhead, I'm going to give it to Slice of Frank, which makes it so that any survivor carrying the box suffers from the exhausted status effect, and this is only good if you know how to play Pinhead properly. As Pinhead, when a survivor is solving the box, you generally don't want to teleport to them, you instead want to interrupt them and chase them so that you can down them while they have the box in their hand, which immediately starts a chain hunt. So if you're close to somebody who's working on the box and you interrupt them, then it's going to be significantly easier to down them quickly because they're not going to be able to use any exhaustion perks. Plus, they're not able to drop the box until they solve it, so they're going to be exhausted until you down them. For the artist, I'm going to have to say the Silver Bell, which makes survivors that are swarmed by dire crows oblivious. So if you have information on the whereabouts of a survivor and you hit them with a crow, they might not realize that you're coming to them because they're not going to hear your terror radius. So if you're constantly sending crows across the map, they may just think it's another one of those, but you're actually coming towards them. I do believe that survivors can see that they get the oblivious status effect when they're affected by it, so they may try to be more aware of the surroundings, but not a lot of people who play artists use this add-on, so I don't think survivors are expecting it. We only have 3 killers left, so if you've made it this far in the video, go drop a flower emoji down in the comments. For the Onryo, I'm going to give this to the Brown Old Newspaper add-on, which increases the invisibility duration after manifesting by 33%. So basically, when you uncloak as the Onryo, you're going to be invisible for 33% longer, which really confuses survivors that don't have you in their line of sight. So you can come around doorways or walls while still invisible and get a lot of free hits on survivors because they don't know where you went. It's a very solid add-on, and it low-key might be one of her best add-ons in the game. For the Dredge, I'm going to give this to the Mortal and Pestle, which makes it so that if you teleport to your Remnant, you're facing in the same direction when you teleport as opposed to the direction that you placed the Remnant in. This is kind of like a quality of life add-on that just makes it easier to know where you are. I mean, maybe it's just me, but a lot of times when I teleport to my Remnant, I lose my bearings of where I am on the map, so I don't know where the survivor is, which gives them enough time to make it to the pallet that they were looping. So this will basically just prevent those situations from happening if you don't remember which way you put the Remnant in. And last but not least, Albert Wesker, I would have to go with the Bullhorn, which makes survivors oblivious for 30 seconds when they use the first aid spray. The reason I think this is underrated is because survivors use the first aid spray a lot. Survivors get infected so often that they're constantly using these sprays, which means that you're going to get a lot of value out of this oblivious status effect, assuming that you take advantage of it. You have to take advantage of it, which you're able to because you're able to see the killer instinct of any survivor that uses the first aid spray. So if you're relatively nearby, you can go directly to them and they won't know that you're coming. Let me know if you agree or disagree with this list below.